This is not about promoting no alcohol, but it is about you understanding how alcohol affects your body, especially as you age.
You know, for decades, cultural norms have painted alcohol in a rosy light, but it's also overshadowing the silent part where the toll that it takes on your health. And there's research that we all lean into that says a glass of red wine every night might be good for heart health. But we want to bring you today the other side of the story, just so that you know.
You know, every sip could be a step away from your actual best well-being. So it's time to confront the reality of alcohol's effects before it's too late. So here's the thing. Did you know alcohol is a class 1 carcinogen linked to several types of cancer? It shrinks your brain, stretches your heart muscle, disrupts your hormones, weakens your immune system, and wreaks havoc on your sleep cycle. You want a beer?
Wow. No, but that's a long list.
It is
so
a long
all
list.
of that is what alcohol does to your body or can do to your body.
And we need to know that, not to change, just
Right.
so that we're aware.
Yeah.
We want you to have an open mind about your relationship with alcohol, and we want you to recognize its potential impacts on your health and well-being, especially as you age. And then maybe consider adopting different or healthier habits and exploring alternatives to alcohol consumption if you feel so inclined.
And I have some personal biases about alcohol because my dad was an alcoholic and that's what killed him. But today, this topic, we want you to pay attention because we want you to think about some of the common perceptions about alcohol. We want to shed light on its often overlooked health implications. You need to know that. That list that you gave was incredible. And if you just stop there, that's enough to say stop drinking. But that's, again, we're not about stop drinking.
Right.
We want to give you information to empower you to make informed decisions about your own personal alcohol consumption, prioritizing your long-term health and your quality of life.
Right, right. So you might be sitting there saying, yeah, but Mark and Jody, it relaxes me, or it's part of my social life, or like 1 or 2 glasses of wine a night is just fine. Or it was such a big part of my career, and this is how I felt when I entered retirement, entertaining clients and out with my team, and it just was such a big part of my career that when I rolled into retirement, I had a hard time stopping or slowing down even.
Well, when we first got married 15 years ago, and we moved in together, and you had your 3 daughters there that were twin 8-year-olds and a 10-year-old, we were working really hard. But we'd come home on 2 wheels. One of us went food shopping, and we'd prep dinner together.
Right.
And we'd have a bottle of white wine while we were cooking dinner, and then a bottle of red wine when we ate dinner, and sometimes an extra glass after that. We didn't, we woke up groggy, we woke up with a hangover, we'd have coffee, but that was our norm.
But we were a lot younger. So our bodies were a lot different.
Well, we were a lot younger, our bodies were different, but it didn't feel like it was getting in the way of our life. We still were productive at work, we still were good parents, we still were nice to each other, but over time we started to pay attention to our bodies, and we've cut back.
Right.
I've cut back completely. And I go in and out of these moments where I might have a glass of wine a month. Right now, I'm not having any.
Right.
But if you're sitting there thinking it relaxes me, it's part of my social life, it's only 1 or 2 glasses of wine a night, okay, just listen to the rest of the video and see, just better understand what it is doing to your body, right?
Right. Yeah.
So if you're new here, I'm Mark, and this is my wife, Jody.
And we don't focus on the financial aspects of retirement, but rather your lifestyle, your health, your relationships, and more.
So please hit the subscribe button and the notification button. But more importantly, please share this video with others who are on the same journey with you. And let us know what you think about this video. Leave some comments below so that we can engage. We really want to hear from you as much as we can. So we got a bunch of stories around alcohol. I mentioned my dad was an alcoholic and that killed him. That's the whole story. I mean,
and my dad was an alcoholic, and he had underlying Parkinson's and not great health, like all around great health. But my dad was the all around great alcoholic. He was charismatic and he was fun and he commanded a room and he had a big personality and he was smart and he connected with people well, and he was a salesman, and he was, the quintessential happy alcoholic. It wasn't like he ever got mean or mad or down or, any of those things. But it really ate away at his health and his wellness as he aged. And I can't say like your dad, it killed your dad. I think it just was a contributor to my dad's poor health as he aged.
Well, that's enough. I mean, if it contributed to it, then you have to you have to think about it. I mean, we're trying to do all that we can right now in this stage of life to be as healthy as we can, to live as long as we can, but more importantly, to be as healthy as we can as we age.
It's interesting. I had a conversation with a person who was in AA last week, and he said to me, I will always put my sobriety above anything else that I love in my life, because if I don't, I will lose those things.
And he was talking about his wife, his kids,
everybody.
His job,
but
everything.
His sobriety had to come first. And what Mark and I are trying to do, and we're trying to implore you to do, is put your health in front of everything so that you don't lose those things that you love, or lose time with those people that you love.
I'm glad that you said that.
Yeah.
I really am. That's important. Speaking of that, there's a free download below, the link to Health and Wellness Checklist. It gives you an overall picture of your health. It's really important to download that and get it if you haven't yet, and go through the questions. But why don't we start with the 5 reasons that we need to be concerned about alcohol as we age? I think that's really a good place to start, because this is a retirement channel, and we're all getting older. So the first thing is, your tolerance is lower now that you're older. I find that. When I was 15 years ago and we were drinking 2 bottles of wine a night together, maybe just a year ago I'd have 1 glass of wine and that was it.
Right.
So your tolerance is definitely lower.
Well, and scientifically, your body can't metabolize as quickly as it did.
Right.
So your metabolism slows down, so
Right.
you're metabolizing the alcohol slower. So
Right.
your tolerance definitely goes down. The second thing is, overall, as we age, older adults have a lower percentage of body water compared to younger people. So we already have a decrease in body water. And since alcohol is distributed in your body water, the results are higher blood alcohol concentrations in older adults, intensifying its effects.
Right.
And that's really interesting to consider, I think.
Mm-hmm. The other thing to consider is medications. As we get older, we tend to start taking medications. Now, many medications interact negatively with alcohol, so you need to check with your doctor. Just because you have high blood pressure or cholesterol or whatever it might be, and you're taking meds for it, you have to find out what the effect of alcohol is in that. So you need to check with your doctor.
The fourth thing is, chronic health conditions that, arise as we age. With age, the likelihood of chronic health conditions increase. Conditions like diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease can negatively be impacted by alcohol consumption and the body's ability to cope with the effects of alcohol, in its system.
So the 5th reason why you need to really think about alcohol consumption as you age is your cognitive and physical effects. Alcohol can definitely exacerbate, did I say that right? Exacerbate age-related declines in cognitive function. It can increase your risk of falls or accidents or injuries. And forget about driving. It used to be, I never drove and drank ever, kinda. But now, if I had a glass of wine, I'm not driving.
Yeah.
Period. Full stop. And it definitely affects your mood and your sleep as you get older. So that's really important. But let's step back for a minute and talk about alcohol in the history. It has been around for thousands and thousands of years. It's been used in religious rituals, social gatherings. It's part of weddings and dinners and ceremonies. So it's been part of our life and cultural traditions forever.
It's really been romanticized, right?
Yeah.
The quintessential beautiful martini glass or the big Bulla red glass of wine. It's really been romanticized in a lot of cultures and traditions.
And that's why it exists. And it's a huge business with lobbyists that will tell you otherwise. But
okay, so now let's talk about what we found out in our research. And please stay to the end where we give you 5 signs that may indicate you're consuming too much alcohol. Okay, so what do we know today? We do know that alcohol affects affects the brain. Even moderate drinking can have more impact on your brain than you might think. It alters your neurotransmitters, affecting your mood and your behavior, and can lead to real cognitive impairment over time. So there's certain mental health issues that, you can draw links to. We're not going to get into all of those right now, but there is obviously a potential for developing dependency and addiction. So right there is a big bucket
That's a big
of
one.
research that you can go deeper into if you want.
And the next one is the physical health implications of drinking alcohol or too much alcohol. Having alcohol in your body or too much alcohol can really pay a high price. It causes liver damage, including fatty liver and cirrhosis. It increases your risk of heart disease and hypertension. It weakens your immune system. Alcohol is actually linked to several types of cancer, including breast and liver cancer. And it messes with your digestive system health and potential for pancreatitis.
Yeah, which is very painful. I don't know
It
if
is.
you've
Well,
ever had pancreatitis.
I've never had it, no.
And then you got to think to yourself, what is the correlation between alcohol and mental health? It's a very complicated relationship between alcohol, stress, and mental wellness. Short term, there's relief, right? Just give me the glass of wine. I just need one glass of wine. But long term, there's real mental health risks. Alcohol can be used as a coping mechanism for stress and anxiety, and the risk of increased mental health conditions is exacerbated with it.
My dad used to say to me, you know what? You're going to drive me to drink with this behavior.
Oh,
and
that was a big saying, drive me to drink.
Drive me to drink. And that was just an excuse. He was going to drink anyway. It wasn't my fault, but,
Right.
Was trying to manage my behavior and tie it into his drinking. But even when we first got married, sometimes we come home from a rough day, say, I just need a drink.
Yeah.
And that's a coping
It
mechanism.
definitely is
And
a
it
coping
doesn't
mechanism.
really help you cope.
Right.
It creates more stress, anxiety, and screws with your body.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about a philosophy of moderation, because there are misconceptions about that. What does it really mean, and is it the same for everyone? I'm just going to have 2 drinks a night, or I'm just going to drink on weekends, or I'm just going to drink once a week. I think it really depends upon you and your body and
Right.
how you feel and what moderate alcohol consumption looks like, right?
Well, definitely. Every individual has different metabolism, right? So you're going to metabolize the sugars in alcohol, for example,
Right.
differently. And we've always been told there's a potential benefit for moderate alcohol consumption, especially, the French diet, always have a glass of red wine every night. But there's a thin line between moderate and excessive drinking, and it's up to you to evaluate that personally, I think.
It used to be that the word on the street, or whatever you want to call it, was, a glass of wine a night is okay, particularly red wine, or a drink a day is okay. But now there are studies coming out saying alcohol will kill you. You shouldn't have it at all. So it's really, again, knowledge. We're trying to give you some knowledge today. We're filtering this ourselves, applying what it is to our life and our kids' life and our friends' lives. If you don't want to drink and you're, and you don't drink at all and you're in the, AA or something like that, it's hard for you to be around other people who are drinking.
Sometimes, yeah, it is.
So
I'm sure. So, how do you recognize problematic drinking, when you're doing your self-assessment? There are signs that your casual drinking might not be so casual. If you're exceeding the recommended drinking limits based on your body weight, your age, and all the other factors. And if you experience withdrawal, like if you say, okay, I'm not going to have a drink today, and you start, getting a little shaky here or there. I know we experienced that with your dad.
Yeah, he would wake up and,
And he would shake a bit until he had his first sip.
Well, he'd have his Bloody Mary at 11, but then, at the end, near the end, he was drinking 24/7, which was sad. He just couldn't. And actually what happened to him was he went into the hospital because he fell, and he couldn't have a drink.
Right.
And he died from withdrawals. They gave him all of the drugs they could that you go through when you're going through detox, and it wasn't enough, and that's what killed him.
And you have to watch to see whether drinking is impacting your personal and professional responsibilities and relationships, and or if you engage in risky behaviors, right? These are things to start to think about for yourself. We're not putting it on you, but for yourself as you evaluate.
Well, the other thing about drinking is there's a lot of societal pressure. So you hang out with people, you go out to dinner, You have a vodka tonic before dinner. You have wine with dinner. It's just the way society and culture is about our drinking habits. And the media and advertising has normalized drinking. I mean,
Right.
the Super Bowl, a lot of it's alcohol, beer or wine. I mean, the wine companies are spending a fortune on, if you look at your phone on Instagram, whatever, it's all over the place. So there's social gatherings that always are built around alcohol,
Right.
and you have peer pressure. So I think that's a tough one to think about reducing, because if everyone you hang out with drinks a lot, then you're going to drink a lot.
Well, I think there's a way to begin in your own mind to shift the narrative around, alcohol in our culture and alcohol in your circle, but you have to be committed to do that,
Right,
for sure.
right.
There are alternatives to alcohol, and exploring healthier alternatives, to unwind and still to socialize. I did dry January, and my neighbor across the street, Paul, and I came up with some pretty fun mocktails, non-alcoholic beverages. We watched the sugar, because the thing about a mocktail is you can still have an excessive amount of sugar
Right.
in a mocktail if you're not careful. We found some hobbies and activities that didn't involve drinking, and kind of tried to stay away from that culture. I know when Mark and I were boating a lot, that boating culture has a lot of drinking, that goes on. And then the last thing I would say is during my dry January, and I will say the first 10 days I was counting every day, and then I got better after that. But mindful meditation and relaxing techniques I employed instead of grabbing for that glass of wine at the end of the day.
Well, the other thing that we're seeing, non-alcoholic beer has been around for quite some time. I think the first one was O'Doul's. Now it feels like everybody has a non-alcoholic beer. I mean, Stella, Heineken, Corona.
Peroni.
And recently, I think in the last couple months, what are these drinks that the kids have?
Oh, the seltzers, the White Claws.
White Claws. There's non-alcoholic White Claws. So you can
So
actually...
Basically, it's a LaCroix.
Yeah, well, and you pay a lot of money for it. But the thing is this. These are alternatives to alcohol and peer pressure, because it looks like you're having a beer. It looks like you're having a White Claw, but you're not.
Right.
So they are alternatives to be in a, unwind socially, and you've got a drink in your hand and you look kind of cool, I guess. But the other thing is, if you feel like you're drinking too much, seeking help and looking at some of those resources is important. I mean, got a lot of friends who are in AA, and it saved their life. It saved their marriage. So don't feel like you can't go to a meeting. Don't feel like therapy's not going to help, or getting a counselor. It really is important to talk to your family and friends about the fact that you're not drinking. I mean, my kids all know I don't drink now.
Right.
So there's no peer pressure.
No.
There's no, do you want to try this? So
Right.
Yeah.
So what you need to do for yourself, or what we're suggesting, is figure out, what is the future of your drinking? The emerging research and trends suggest, that the future of alcohol consumption could be steady over the next 10 years or decline with healthy alternatives. Recent studies are challenging previous beliefs about alcohol benefits, if there ever were any. There's some challenges going on out there, and there's a growing popularity of sober curiosity and sober-free lifestyles, which are becoming more trendy these days, for sure.
So I like that word, sober curious. Some people don't. I mean, people that don't drink at all, and they might be in A or something, don't like it. But I think it's a good term. I mean, I actually used that for a while when I was experimenting with not drinking, because listen, it's hard to stop drinking if it's part of your life and part of who you are and part of the way you unwind. But I became sober curious, and right now I'm alcohol free.
Right.
And it's okay.
Yeah. You're doing okay.
Yeah. As promised, here are 5 signs that might indicate that you're consuming too much alcohol. And just listen to these, no judgment here, but the first thing is, if you're exceeding the drinking guidelines, which I don't know where these came from, but the guidelines for drinking is up to 1 drink per day for women and 2 for men. So if you're having more than that, then you're exceeding the drinking guidelines, and you might want to give that some thought.
And the second thing is, are you neglecting your responsibilities? Failing to fulfill work or school or home responsibility because of your drinking. that becomes problematic, and that may suggest you have a bit of a problematic relationship with alcohol.
Okay. The third reason where you might find that you're drinking too much is your change in tolerance. If you need to consume more alcohol to achieve the same effects you used to experience with less alcohol, that is a signal that your tolerance is increasing and a precursor to dependence. And that's what happened to my dad. He started drinking 24/7. He couldn't turn it off. So he never quit, but he should have. That's another whole story.
And the fourth thing is, are you experiencing withdrawal symptoms? Headaches, nausea, anxiety, shakiness if you haven't had a drink. That's definitely going to indicate physical dependence.
And the fifth reason to know that you're drinking too much is that you're continuing to drink even though you have all the problems we just stated. If it's causing you health problems or social problems or legal problems, then you know what? You're probably drinking too much, and you need to really address it and think about it.
I mentioned I did dry January, and it felt great. I slept well. I was better hydrated. I worked out more. I lost some weight. I didn't feel bloated. And I did miss my glass of wine each night for the first week. But, I got over it and got through it. So my recommendation is challenge yourself and do it with a friend and give yourself a time frame and see how you feel.
I'm doing dry 2024. That's my goal.
Yep, I remember.
And we'll see how it goes. If you enjoyed this video, and we hope you did this next one, top tips for holiday eating. We tend to eat poorly at holidays, and we tend to drink more at holidays. So this is a great next video to watch.